So have any of you ever seen anything that looks like this before? Yeah? Yeah, flaming chalice, that's right. And this is a piece of stained glass. So it's a flaming chalice made of stained glass. And there was a very famous man who made stained glass, who was named Louis Comfort Tiffany. And he made stained glass starting in 1875, a long time ago. And for 40 to 50 years, his company produced some of the most beautiful stained glass anyone had ever seen. And they still, people still value this stained glass. So he made church windows, and he made lamps, and he made vases, and you may see knockoffs in places like restaurants or in other windows. And the reason that we know that they were knockoffs is because when Mr. Tiffany died in 1933, the secret formula that he used to make his beautiful stained glass, it was lost because he never told anybody how he made it. So there's no new stained glass being produced anymore, and no one has ever been able to copy how well he did it. So today, Tiffany glass is some of the most valuable stained glass in the whole world, and a small lamp or a small vase made by Mr. Tiffany might sell for thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, you know what? Each one of you is a little bit like a valuable piece of Tiffany's stained glass, because when you were each made, you were the very best you that could ever have been made, and there's only one of you. There's only one you in the entire world. And you know, the funny thing about stained glass is that it needs light to shine through it to make it the most beautiful it can be. So this kind of looks like it's just a black piece and a kind of orangey piece. But if you put a light behind it, you can see all the colors come through. And if you put a light behind a piece of stained glass, you can see all the colors and how beautiful all the colors are. And people, just like stained glass, come in lots of different colors too. But underneath our outsides, there's a spirit that shines out of each of us. And when we let light and love shine through us, we bring beauty to the world just the same way that Mr. Tiffany brought beauty to the world. So that's what we have to say today. Thank you so much for sharing with me. Oh, yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there is a light that would shine, be powerful enough to shine. I usually have like my sunlight come through it. We could try. Oh yeah, we'll try. Woohoo! So the reading I brought this morning is from the Kabul Beauty School. There was a woman named Deborah Rodriguez who, amidst some turmoil in her life, decided that she was going to escape to an even more chaotic place and try to do some good. And so it starts, "Suddenly I realized I hadn't seen an Afghan beauty salon yet." She's a hairdresser, and she's been there for, I think it was 3 months at this point, and she hadn't seen a single beauty salon that was actually in country. So I asked Roshana if she and Daud could take me to one. They agreed, but it took us a week to find a storefront salon that was actually open for business. We had been told that many hairdressers were working again, but they were only operating salons in their homes, still too afraid of public scrutiny to hang up a sign or post that telltale prom queen photo. In the last few days, we had seen several places that looked like they might be salons, only to find them empty. But someone had told Roshana about this salon, so we set out to find it. It was no easy task, since most of Kabul's streets didn't have names at that time. I couldn't see inside the salon as we approached, and I was afraid it might be another of those empty shells. But when Roshana opened the door, I smelled perm solution. I felt a little bad about making Daoud wait outside and told Roshana, but she shook her head briskly. "No man comes inside here," she said. "This is not allowed in our salons because the women have no head coverings." "But Daoud and the other Afghan men see you without your head covered at the guest house." "Well, it's different in a guest house. It's like being in a little piece of America. And for salons, it is very strict here. If the husband of the woman who owns this salon saw Daoud inside, he would beat him or maybe even kill him." I looked at her incredulously, sure she must be exaggerating. "It's true, Debbie," she said. "That's why the curtain hangs inside the door, so that even when the door is open, no man can look inside and see the woman." "No man can come in?" "Not even the beautician's husband," Roshana said. "It's a place for only women." Roshana pulled me into a small vestibule, shut the door, and then lifted a pink curtain that hung before the entrance to the room. I had a new sense of curiosity about the salon and wondered if it was going to be different from salons back home in the States. Well, inside, it was smaller and darker than the salons at home, not much bigger than a bathroom. The view out to the street, or in from the street, was blocked by lace curtains, and there was only one small broken mirror instead of the wall of mirrors. Instead of a counter, there was a rough wooden plank. I thought I saw blue salon capes hanging from pegs on a wall, but then realized that those were burqas, which had been removed when the women came in the door. But aside from those differences, I felt that same warm, welcoming presence that I'd spent most of my life in. There were women's voices, women's laughter, and that feeling of women relaxing with one another and telling one another the details of their lives and the news of the lives around them. I wondered if this was the real reason that the Taliban had been so opposed to beauty salons. Not because they made women look beautiful or were fronts for bad things, as the Taliban claimed, but because they gave women their own space where they were free from the control of men. Light from Within. Did any of you ever watch that show, Toddlers and Tiaras? When my older daughter was little, I would watch it. Sometimes with horrified fascination, and sometimes, I hate to admit it, with envy. So if you're not familiar with the show, each episode follows a family or a couple of families who put their young children, usually daughters, into beauty pageants. The show is a bit of a gotcha show. Part of its attraction seems to be showing the parents at their very worst and their children at their very brattiest. So there's a beaming mother who shows off this huge cabinet full of gleaming plastic trophies, and then insists that, oh, but my daughter loves it, and we wouldn't do pageants if she didn't love it. And then right after she says that, they show like the child, screaming about her fake eyelashes and how she doesn't want them today. Mommy, can she not have fake eyelashes today? Or the mommy is dumping a pixie stick into a can of Mountain Dew for special juice to make the child happy on stage. Yeah, really. But one thing that amazed me was that every child, however far from the standards of beauty that she may have been in real life, so they show the before and after picture, every child was beautiful once they put her in hair and makeup. It's like every child is Cinderella with the ball gown. And on one hand, how wonderfully democratic that is, that our standards of beauty are perfectly achievable for everyone. You don't have to be born with beauty. You can just make it with, a really nice manicure. On the other hand, how terrible is it that our standards of beauty are so artificial that you can make your own beauty with a nice manicure? It's so artificial, so far from the way girls are born and so far from the way that nature makes us. I see you back there comparing your manicures. So I'm never sure how to take this. Is beauty really in the eye of the beholder? Well, Nancy Echthoff's book, Survival of the Prettiest, argues that there are some markers of beauty that are innate rather than the product of culture. For example, babies, like even babies who are 1 to 2 weeks old, will look longer at faces that adults rate as beautiful, no matter what the ethnicity. So it's not, oh, they are used to seeing their mom, and so now anyone who looks like their mom. It's no, if adults rate this person as beautiful, babies are likely to also rate. They're also to look longer, which shows that they're more interested in that face. And, even tribes in the Amazon who have very little contact with the outside world, if you bring them pictures of the ideal body shapes, like there's this scale where it shows computer-generated images that go from one end of a scale to another end of a scale. Even in the Amazon, where they don't know what we all think of and what we see in magazines, they agree with us on what the most desirable body shape is. And by the way, it's not what's in magazines. So the Free Dictionary defines beauty as a quality or combination of qualities that give pleasure to the mind or senses. And with that definition, it seems like anything could be beautiful. In fact, I remembered recently that I heard that mathematicians see beauty in equations. And my husband's a mathematician, and I asked him, and he's like, oh yeah, no, there are some that are really, really gorgeous. I'm like, okay. But, I looked it up, and I found a 2016 article in The Guardian that backed up his assertion. The man who wrote the article, Ian Sample, wrote, brain scans of mathematicians show that gazing at formula that they consider beautiful actually elicits activity in the same part of the brain, the same emotional region that great art and great music activate. And the more beautiful the formula, the greater the activity in the medial orbital frontal cortex. So as far as the brain is concerned, math has a beauty just like art. There's a common neurophysiological ground. That's what Sir Michael Atiyah, an honorary professor of mathematics at Edinburgh University, says. Wow. A measurable reaction to beauty actually happens in our brains. So beauty might be in the eye of the beholder or in the ear of the listener, but there really is something physical, something going on in our minds when we perceive beauty. We have an involuntary reaction to the beautiful. And in researching this talk, I looked up the term inner beauty. Well, there were no dictionary definitions because it's two separate words, but Urban Dictionary defines inner beauty as being a generally good person. David Servin Schreiber of the website Psychologies quotes Audrey Hepburn when he defines inner beauty. Never throw out anybody. The beauty of a woman is not in a facial mole. True beauty in a woman is reflected in her soul. It is in the caring that she lovingly gives, the passion that she shows. The beauty of a woman with passing years only grows. That's a lovely sentiment, and it's a lovely poem. But I wanted to find something more. So I went to a website that looked promising. It was called Inner Beauty Concepts. And what did I find at Inner Beauty Concepts? Microdermabrasion, eyelash tinting, body waxing. Wait, inner beauty? In the book Cinderella Ate My Daughter, Peggy Orenstein tells the story of one pageant family, one who's featured on Toddlers and Tiaras. The mother used to be a dancer, and she's now a pharmaceutical sales rep. And the Toddlers and Tiaras crew filmed weeks of positive interactions, and what they chose to show on the show was the time when the mother yelled at the daughter for getting a part of her routine wrong. Okay, you say, well, if that's reality TV, what do you expect? But that's not the only thing they left out of the story. That family has another child. they have a child that they never showed on any episode, and that family was in like 3 episodes. That other child is a son whose brain didn't develop past infancy. And for the first few years of their daughter's life, their family was concentrating on her brother and his health and making sure he was okay. And so the reason they chose pageants is that so their daughter would have a chance to be the center of attention, to be the one who was adored. They chose pageants as the mean to give their bright, athletic, well child a chance to feel like a princess. And as Orenstein says, princess is the word we use when we want to tell little girls that they're special. So in their rush to play to the judgmental public, myself included, the Toddlers and Tiara's crew left out this humanizing and beautiful part of that story. They didn't show the way that the whole family is patient and kind and loving towards their child who cannot hear or walk or talk. So, with all the opportunities that we have in modern life, we must value inner beauty and development of the whole person more than we used to, right? Okay, I can already see the skepticism. It's Instagram, yes, I know, so maybe not. Well, Orenstein references historian Joan Jacobs Brumberg's work, and she says that before World War I, self-improvement meant helping others and cultivating empathy and learning about the world through reading and through schoolwork. And Orenstein compares girls' New Year's resolutions from the end of the 19th century to New Year's resolutions from the end of the 20th century, when women's opportunities have broadened quite a bit. So, a young woman of yore might have resolved to think before speaking, to work seriously, to be self-restrained in conversations and actions, not to let thoughts wander, to be dignified, to be interested in others. A contemporary girl, she found a resolution that was actually, as part of her research, she goes into schools. So this is one that she took from one of the resolutions she asked for from one of the girls in the school. I will try to make myself better in any way that I can. Okay, sounds good. I will lose weight, get new contact lenses, get a haircut, get good makeup, and get better clothes and accessories. Okay. And that brings me to the story of the Kabul Beauty School. I don't know about you guys, but I remember when I was a kid, if you heard somebody talking about Afghan, what they meant was blanket. It was just like a Davenport was the word for sofa. Although I suppose that as a child I may have heard of Afghanistan, it was probably in about the same way that I heard of Timbuktu, the capital of Mali. It wasn't a place, it was a cartoon caricature, you know, the kind of place that Bugs Bunny would tunnel to and then pop up saying, what's up, Doc? So, despite the name Kabul Beauty School, the memoir of Debbie Rodriguez wasn't so much about the transformative power of the right clothes and the right hair and the right makeup. It was more about the transformative power of getting an education and having opportunities. The culture of Afghanistan at that time, this was 2003 was when she started, that it was such that to look at people, like to look at a woman was a sin, and to be looked at as a woman could be range from sin to crime. And yet still there, as everywhere else, beauty is valued, because beauty is something that happens in our brain, it's not conscious, so beauty is valued. And, you know, a trained beautician in Afghanistan makes about 400 times more than the average Afghani woman. 400 times more. And this is key. Because men are not allowed in the salon, a woman's husband or father or brother is not there when the money changes hands. So she gets to keep her profits. If she does something else like weave rugs, sell eggs in the marketplace, sell vegetables, clean houses, then it's expected that her husband or her brother or sometimes even her son will be in control of that money. But if she is an entrepreneur who runs her own business, she gets to keep her money because men aren't allowed in the salon. So the international charity organization Afghan Aid, this is not the same one that Debbie Rodriguez went to, but she wasn't the only one with this idea. What they said was, for many women in Afghanistan, working outside the home is not socially acceptable. And that is still true. Therefore, increasing opportunities available to them to earn income and to educate themselves within their homes is truly empowering. Each new beautician graduates with lots of new skills, their very own beautician toolkit, and the opportunity to contribute to their family's future. There are cultural practices in parts of Afghanistan, like in Samigan, which prevent women from opening up businesses in public places, because again, public places, there might be men who see the women. So the environment may not allow for female-led businesses to operate in public, but a woman can operate a salon within her home, and that's an empowering solution for her. So reading that book and doing that research about a war-torn city where women are harassed in the street and looked down upon if they defend themselves against harassment, that makes me once again so grateful for the life I have here in America. But that doesn't change the fact that there are some things about American culture that we could work on. There was a famous author, Victorian-era novelist in England. Her name was George Eliot. And she said, "Bless us, things may be lovable that are not altogether handsome, I hope." So George Eliot was the pen name of Mary Ann Evans, a Victorian-era novelist who took on a male pen name to ensure that her writing would be taken seriously rather than dismissed as romantic nonsense. She was really smart, she was an excellent reader, and she was not beautiful. Therefore, her father decided it would be okay for her to be educated. Because she wasn't beautiful enough to be married, so she may as well learn something. Well, she went to a number of boarding schools from the ages of 9 to 16, and at 16, upon the death of her mother, she returned home to keep house for her father, where she was allowed library privileges at Arbury Hall, which was the estate that her father managed for the Newdigate family. After her father's death, she became a literary critic and assistant editor of the Westminster Review. Now, apparently, for all intents and purposes, she was the actual editor, but at that point in time, there was no way that anyone would allow a woman to be the editor, so she was the assistant. And while doing this work, she met the love of her life, George Lewis. Unfortunately, they could not marry because he was already married to a woman he was not legally allowed to divorce. There's some technicalities in divorce law back then. But they lived together as husband and wife from 1854 until his death in 1878. And Lewis was the person who encouraged her to write. Indeed, some scholars believe that the pen name George Eliot carries a secret message, which is, "To George L, I owe it." So, yeah? Now, of George Eliot's looks, the writer Henry James was quoted as saying, "She had a low forehead, a dull gray eye, a vast pendulous nose, a huge mouth full of uneven teeth, and a chin and jawbone qui n'en finissait pas. Now, in this vast ugliness resides a most powerful beauty, which in a very few minutes steals forth and charms the mind, so that you end as I ended, in falling in love with her. Yes, behold me in love with this great horse-faced bluestocking." And this was someone who liked her. So, when Google offered me images of her, oh, okay, let's see what she actually looked like. She was totally normal. Okay, so she wasn't super beautiful. She wasn't a supermodel, but I was expecting Igor from Frankenstein. She was normal. She was like somebody you'd see anywhere. But how much of her life was determined by the fact that she wasn't pretty. And Eliot herself said, "All honor and reverence to the divine beauty of form. Let us cultivate it to the utmost in men, women, and children, in our gardens and in our houses. But let us love that other beauty too, which lies in no secret of proportion, but in the secret of deep human sympathy." And you know, George Eliot, her most famous book, Middlemarch, that is the thing that people take away from Middlemarch, that she had such deep empathy for all of her characters. Now, her books are really long, so she's not as famous as Austen, but she's much kinder to her subjects than Austen ever was. So another book that I looked through trying to prepare for this talk was The Power of Beauty by Nancy Friday. And I have to be honest, the reason I say looked through was because I disliked her voice so much that I couldn't get through it. I only read a couple of chapters. She kept speaking about how women are trying to recapture their mother's gaze through the eyes of men, and I couldn't agree, and I was getting all defensive. And I felt bad because even though she keeps repeating that she had a wonderful relationship with her mother, she always thought it was so close and loving, she comes off as sounding envious, and she like, it just pushed my buttons. I could empathize with her long dead mother as a mom who tries but isn't perfect. And although Friday says that she loved her mother more once she realized that her mother was not perfect, it doesn't sound like it. And you know, like George Eliot, Nancy Friday, perfectly lovely woman, grew up feeling like she wasn't beautiful. But the part of her writing that really struck me was that she felt that everyone is trying to be seen. Not seen with the eyes, but seen with the heart. And that the relentless pursuit of beauty is all a part of a quest to be looked at and to be seen for who we are. And that without the outer self being acknowledged, that no one will ever notice the inner self. So my younger daughter is not shy about asking to be seen. If she feels like someone's ignoring her, she sticks her hands on your face and turns your head. And I do something of the same thing to my older daughter. If she starts talking to me and trails off in the middle of watching TV, then I stand in between her and the TV and I say, "What was it you needed, honey?" Because I want her to look at me. I want her to see me. And sometimes we all need to be reminded to look at people while they're speaking. One of my favorite authors, Michelle Sagara, had a story on her blog about her high-functioning son who's on the autism spectrum. He is very literal. She had to remind him as a child that he needed to look at people while they talked to him. And he said, "But Mom, I listen with my ears." So my mother started a new UU church in Lockport, New York in the early 90s. And it was a beautiful old white church building with a large grassy area outside. And I remember this so clearly, not because I remember my mother speaking, but because I remember being outside one day with the nursery attendant who said to me, "You know, I can see the light in you." And those were 7 simple words that stick with me 25 years later. When I feel down, I think about her telling me that she could see the light in me. I'm still touched. Tara Brach's book, True Refuge, tells another story of the power of really seeing someone. In the section of the book about the gateway of love, she tells the story of a man she calls Richie. He's an African-American photojournalist who married a Caucasian woman, and the woman's mother, who Brach calls Sharon, is not very welcoming. And the situation was getting worse and worse, and Richie's wife was upset, and Richie was upset, and Richie's wife got to the point where she didn't even want to go celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, because the way that her mother was treating her husband was so hurtful. And they could have gone that way, and no one would have blamed them. But as Audrey Hepburn said, never throw out anybody. And Richie was following a meditative practice of compassion, so he decided to try to bring compassion to that situation. He brought compassion to the little boy inside himself who was once again being rejected by a family who could be offering love. And he brought compassion to his mother-in-law, who was just so afraid. She was afraid that her daughter would be unhappy in her marriage. And he also brought his camera to Thanksgiving. And every time he got upset, he would look through the viewfinder of the camera and he would remind himself to be compassionate towards his mother-in-law and compassionate towards himself. And that Thanksgiving, he took 2 amazing photos. One of his mother-in-law holding her brand new granddaughter, where the light of love and caring shone down at the baby in her arms. And one with her husband, Richie's father-in-law, where the 2 of them were laughing together, and the light of joy was just so blinding in their faces. And then at Christmas, he gave her these 2 photos in beautiful frames. And she was so touched that she began to cry, and not just cry, but sob to the point where people said, "What is wrong?" And Brock writes, Richie had truly seen Sharon, her vulnerability and her spirit. He had expressed his care by mirroring her goodness. And because he hadn't given up on her, a thaw began. And this, to me, is inner beauty. When your caring heart opens up the heart of another, when your light is multiplied by sharing. And this is why we have as our symbol the flaming chalice, because we let our light, our inner beauty shine. And when we shine, it is, as Pablo Neruda said, as if you were on fire from the inside. The moon lives in the lining of your skin. We all have a light inside us, and that light shines brighter when it's shared. The Buddha directed us to be a lamp unto yourself, but that doesn't mean a solitary light in the darkness. What I take from that is that you have to remember that you are the lamp, and your light is not a reflection in someone else's eyes, but your own internal, sacred, beautiful light, and no one can take it away from you. And just like that flame grows when one candle is lit from another, your light can never be diminished by the lights that surround you. Indeed, the brightness of shared community illuminates the whole world.